Hello, everyone. I'm KeithDeStone, and I'm here again for another installment of Office Hours with Greg Nagy and Claudia and Hélène, and especially today, Casey Dué Hackney, someone we've known for a long time, and we're glad to be with you again, Casey. Um, and we're going to talk more about anger and Achilles and a lot of other fun stuff. So, Greg, I want to turn it over to you right away.
Well, thank you, Keith, and thank you, Claudia. Thank you, Hélène, and special thank you to you, Casey. I feel, Casey, that you and I are such veterans of the whole the whole project of ancient Greek heroes. That you and I have worked together so many years in so many ways. And despite your youth, there have been a lot of years that we have grappled with how to convey the idea of ancient Greek heroes. And of course, we have to start with Achilles in most courses about heroes. And I did that again, Casey, this year, but kind of different. And I'll try to summarize it for you in half a minute. And Keith, you time me, which is, I love the way in Iliad 18, dear Casey, Achilles says, this is the way he would say it today, damn my holos. I wish I had never had it, but I've got it. And we all know it's going to get even worse. But I love the way he says, and the fact that I have this holos is why I now have to accept my death. But then even Heracles accepted his death, he says. And that's thanks to the anger, the holos of Hera. Wow, I never really paid much attention to this amazing act of poetry by Achilles, who is, shall we say, rivaling the ultimate poietes, Homer, as as fifth century and sixth century Greeks would imagine. And since you, I think, have, and I've now gone way over half a minute, but since you have been a pioneer in and I think of two books, not one, not just your book about Briseis, but your later book about Achilles. You've been a pioneer in trying to get us to appreciate who Achilles is, despite his very questionable actions.
Yes.
So please, I'd like for you just to give it as many minutes as you like, but you have so many things to say, and maybe start backwards in time. Start with your latest book on Achilles, and we work our way back.
Okay. Um, is it okay if I already talk about Blade Runner?
Oh yes, oh my God, yes, because we've experienced that together as well.
We have. And
Yeah.
in fact, inspired by our teaching together back in the late 90s, um, I made a course at the University of Houston called From Homer to Hollywood. And the first movie that we watch is Blade Runner. And I use it to try to get my students to understand this complicated character of Achilles because many, modern students just really don't like him. They think he's a big baby or they think he's throwing a temper tantrum or whatever. And I try to get them to understand him on many different levels, including, of course, as a religious figure, as a hero who was worshipped after his death and beloved, mourned, I should say, maybe more than beloved, like just mourned for all time. But but I like to use Blade Runner to try to get people to understand what this figure is because he is someone who knows he could have been the next ruler of the universe, right? He could have been Zeus's son. He could have overthrown Zeus. Zeus has done all these things to prevent his overthrow, one of which was to not impregnate Thetis, but he could have and would have if he hadn't found out about this prophecy that Thetis would give birth to a son that was greater than his father. And so Achilles knows all this. And he also knows that he is going to die young if he returns to battle, that he's going to die very young. You know,
Yeah.
he may only be something like 18 years old
Yeah.
in the Iliad. So instead of being the next ruler of the universe and immortal, he is going to, you know, die in a blaze of chaos, right? A blaze of glory.
Yes.
But he you know, but so he's mourning his own life throughout the Iliad. Uh and you know, this is a perfect comparison with Roy Batty in Blade Runner, someone who is better than humans. He's made to be superior to humans. He's a replicant. He could last forever, but he's been made not to last intentionally by his creators. And so he's going to have this extremely brief 4-year lifespan. And he's come on a quest to Earth to try to find his maker and get more life. I mean, that's what he says. I want more life. And he calls the scientist that made him father. Although there's different cuts of the movie, and
Oh,
in one
yes.
of them he seems to be saying not father, but a
Let's
curse
say,
word.
yes, inseminator. Yes.
Yes. Oh, I love it. I love it. Inseminator, but a bad word.
A
Okay.
bad word, a bad
Starts
word.
with F. But and so he has so much grief and anger about his short lifespan, and those of his companions, right? It's not just him, but the people, the replicants he's brought with him.
Yeah.
But for Achilles, you know, he's really grappling with, you know, what does his life mean? What is he supposed to get out of this brief life? When Achilles, I mean, sorry, when Agamemnon dishonors him,
Yeah.
he's like, you know, what is the point of all this? And it just sparks, you know, grief and rage for the life that you know that he is not going to have. And so I try to convey all this to the students, because you kind of have to know a lot of background about Achilles before the Iliad in order to appreciate him when you do meet him. And of course, an ancient audience would have known all of this. And
Yes.
that's a tricky thing about reading oral traditional poetry, is that you need to try to get where the audience would have been by knowing all the background that they would have known as being, you know, immersed in this oral traditional culture. And so they would have known all these stories. They would have known that Achilles is going to die young. They would have known that he was mourned for all time. They would have known him as a powerful religious entity as well. And so, uh, so I feel like Blade Runner is really a perfect way to start to try to get into Achilles' emotions and this compressed life that he has to grapple with when he is superior, like Roy, to other, right?
Yes.
He's superior to Agamemnon in every way. He's
Yes.
just not as powerful.
Yes. Yes. He doesn't have the political clout. And something, dear Casey, that I have sort of learned to appreciate more, especially by reading your latest book on Achilles, is how Achilles feels let down not just by the society in which he is operating, where he should be honored more than anybody else, just in terms of being a hero, because Agamemnon is an inferior hero, but unfortunately for Achilles, he's a superior king. I now call him an over king. This is Agamemnon. But I would love for you to talk more on the basis of your wonderful track record as both a teacher and a researcher. And you're the perfect example where good teaching drives good research, not just good research drives good teaching. Um, if you could maybe parse two little facts that I've learned about Blade Runner just this year because, hello, I looked him up in Wikipedia. And at Harvard, we now have all sorts of options for courses to ban artificial intelligence. And I like banning artificial intelligence if it's supposed to help you write an essay. But I write an essay, I mean create an essay with artificial intelligence. However, um, let's put it this way, when it comes to this replicant who's programmed to live only for 2 years, I found out that the actor, whom I've always admired, and now I know how to pronounce his name, that's going to be one of my factoids. So he's not
Okay.
German. He's not German. He's Dutch.
Okay.
And he was very sympathetic with the Dutch resistance against the Nazis. And he was born in 1944, so he was I have to say was 2 years younger than I am, but he died before I died. He died just recently, and now I pronounce his name to honor him. I'll try to do this as close to the Dutch pronunciation as I can. Rutger Hauer. Rutger. And
Okay.
um, and so second fact is that apparently, and let's not worry about whether he was inspired by, shall we say, ingesting a mind-altering substance, or whether it was just inspiration by a muse like our friend Hélène. Um, for those of you who don't know, I call Hélène, my colleague at Cosmos Society, one of the three muses, but we'll get to Hélène later. Um, so it turns out that Rutger Hauer, composed the last lines of what he says. And so I decided I got to memorize it to honor him. All those moments will be lost in time like tears in rain. Time to die.
Yes,
Wow.
I know.
Now, I want you to comment on the basis of all your research and all your teaching.
Okay. Um, I want to start by saying I also love the way the speech starts with
Oh,
I've
yes.
seen things you people wouldn't believe. But I think you are referencing all of my work on lament, perhaps.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And so that Achilles I mean, sorry, I should say Roy, before he dies, performs a kind of lament for his own life and for his own death. And the phenomenon of lament is something that is always worth thinking about in connection with the Iliad, because in many ways it infuses epic poetry, is the foundation of epic poetry. Epic poetry praises heroes, but also grieves for them. And Achilles is a prime example of someone who, once he makes that decision to go back into battle, everyone starts lamenting, with Patroclus as their pretext, but really also for Achilles. And they're so interconnected, their deaths are so interconnected that one is already knowing that Achilles will die, and they already start grieving as soon as Patroclus dies. But in terms of Roy, he doesn't have anyone left to lament for him. And so he laments himself in this beautiful brief monologue. But even just the idea of the tears in the rain is referencing this idea of grief and dying, and how I don't know, connecting him to the natural forces, to blooming and dying, and being washed away and forgotten. And lament is a way to not forget right? So if he tells the story, if he's, sings the song of his life, however brief it, others can then tell the story later, just as we just quoted it, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
But so the Iliad is such a song for Achilles,
Yes.
and Achilles does have people, to lament him after he's gone. But one of the things that have been really interesting, well, I should give a little background and just say that
Please,
the
please.
genre of lament is, these songs of grief that were sung primarily by women in the ancient world. It was a practice that was done all over the Mediterranean, and it's rooted in funeral practice. It has ritual force, but it's an oral tradition that women carried with them into their daily lives as well. So anthropologists have been able to document this practice around the Mediterranean into modern times, into the 1980s. I don't know if there's anyone still doing it now, but you can actually YouTube videos of lament, of ancient Greek. I mean, I'm sorry, not ancient, modern Greek
Yes.
funeral lament. And actually, I've met someone from Finland who practices a similar form of lament, even professionally. She's a professional mourner. People can hire her to lament at funerals.
Yes.
But this was a genre that goes back thousands and thousands of years and was performed by women all over the Mediterranean, like I say, but especially in Greece. And it was a form of song that was, handed down and taught from mothers to daughters, from grandmothers to granddaughters, from aunts to nieces, and it's a form of song that was so associated with grief that even just, a few strains of it would have led to, tears and crying and all kinds of sorrow. So it's a song of sorrow, but it's also a song of comfort, in the sense that women could express themselves through this genre of song. It was a form of sanctioned speech for them. Ancient Greek women did not have a lot of opportunities to speak out about their lives, but they could within the context of lament, and they definitely did. Now, in the Iliad, we have to think about the fact that we're on the battlefield, and there are not many women around. Briseis is one, and Achilles' captive concubine, and she laments in book 19. She when she returns to the camp and finds that Patroclus is dead. And so her only spoken words in the Iliad are, even though she's so central to the plot, her only spoken words are a lament. And when she tells her own life story and her hopes for the future and her grief that Patroclus has died. And the women around her lament in response, because ancient Greek laments always were a sort of a call and response type of thing, where there was a community of mourners around the primary lamenter, and they would answer back. And so the other women there, the other captive women, also lament for their own griefs, their own cares. Um, but on the battlefield, there's not a lot of women. There are not mothers there, right? The mothers are not there to lament. The grandmothers are not there. The wives are not there. So the men become mothers to each other, and they lament one another. And so Achilles mourns Patroclus. When Patroclus dies, and all of book 17 is devoted to the fight for his corpse, to get his body back, and you witness the grief and shock and horror of all of his comrades when they find out that he has died and their fight for him. And so Achilles absolutely laments in the Iliad, and because there's not another person, and there's certainly not another person there than Achilles. So I love how Blade Runner takes this up and makes well, I don't know if it's an intentional homage in any way, but that it gives Roy the opportunity to lament himself. Another character that does this, just I happen to be thinking about at the moment, is Antigone. Antigone also has lost most of her family. And when she is being led to the cave where the ruler of Thebes, Creon, is going to imprison her, she laments herself.
Yeah.
So it is possible to lament yourself when there's not someone else there to do it. And it's a beautiful, powerful statement, because lament is the time that your life and deeds are articulated in song, right? And
Yes.
so that's the beginning of chaos. And so, like, for someone like Antigone, she's establishing what she wants her story to be. Um, for the warriors on the battlefield, you're beginning, you're initiating their chaos when you lament them. And so, if no one is there to lament you, there's no one there to start the story, you know. And
Yes.
so,
Yes.
Roy has to sing his own, um, but um, you know, Achilles does too at various moments. You know,
Yes. Yes.
in the Iliad, he talks about how he is most unseasonal of them all. He's the
Yes.
one to die, even though he could, even though he has a goddess for a mother, even though he's the best fighter, the best of the Achaeans, the undisputed best of the Achaeans, but he is going to die so young, and he laments it.
Wow. Now, dear Casey, do you mind if we do some contemporary history, which
Okay.
is, and I'm going to go backwards in time. The current head teaching fellow for the Harvard College course, which is now general education. When you and I worked on Heroes, it was called core curriculum. Um, Her name is Erin Jones, and she's an Egyptologist, and she's a brilliant head TF, kind of takes after you, but there's also somebody in between, and that is KeithDeStone. And I'm going to put Keith on the spot. How many years were you TFing and then head TFing for Heroes?
Oh, I forget. I always forget, but I've started to say a round number of 10, including all of those different times.
10.
Hmm.
That's a lot, okay? And now let's go further back to Casey. And here you are, two very young faces. But Casey, can you tell the people out there when you and Mary were working with me? And I mean with me, not for me. It was so good. Um,
It was 1998 to 2001 when I don't know if you say graduated. I got my degree in 2001. But in the years prior to that, I was working on the Heroes class.
oh,
And
yes, you were. Oh, yes, you were. Absolutely. And so,
yes, and
so
I was actually the one that introduced the whole focus passages concept.
yes, yes, yes. And we still call them focus passages, although now we sometimes, Keith, will you talk about what it is to have a deep read and what is it
Sure.
to read
I'm more of a slow
something
reading era
deeper?
person, but I remember focus passages, especially with the MOOC. We started talking about slow reading and fast reading. Fast reading is when you just need to know you need to know the story, get it in as fast as possible, download it if you could, like Neo in the Matrix. Slow reading is when you slow down and savor each word, give yourself a chance for it to sink in. Um, but deep reading is similar because you're bringing, I would say it this way, you're learning to read out of the text. There are a lot of things besides the words that are going on. You have to appreciate, for example, the reality that Achilles, as you said, Casey, is a powerful object of worship in this world, and so cult realities, religious realities, ritual realities are important to see in the text, behind the text in some way. So, learning to go deep in the text um, is how I interpret the phrase deep reading, the label deep reading anyway.
And we're not done yet. Now, I turn to Claudia, who has been, um, there was a gap after 2015, but before 2015, Claudia was my editor. And I mean everything that is good about an editor and somebody who can think with you, who can who can look ahead and look behind in the past, and who is a classicist in her own right. And I just managed this year to recruit Claudia and recruit Keith together as, may I put it this way, the custodians of all our lived experience with the Heroes Project, which is not a Greg project, it's a Heroes Project, and how to depersonalize it and to make it continue. And the medium is called classical continuum, as you know, dear Casey.
Yes.
But maybe Claudia could expand. And by the way, in the general education heroes course, we've now had hour 0, hour 1, and hour 2. And I'll say more about that in a minute. And what Claudia has done in partnership with the head teaching fellow, Aaron Jones, what Claudia Filos, whose name etymologically has, I wish it did have to do with Philos, but it's Filos. And it's an accident that it sounds very much like who she is, which is so near the top of my ascending scale of affection. Uh, so, so Claudia, can you tell everybody out there what your role is as the custodian of my content, but really the hero's content as transmitted by Casey and Keith, and then really you, and now by Aaron as
Sure.
well.
Well, it's just an opportunity for me to say that what I'm trying to do for all the folks who are receiving the content on Classical Continuum is find ways to develop community and develop conversation. And a really important way that we're doing that is to collaborate with the Cosmos Society and our friends there, like Hélène and Janet and Sarah and all the team there who have also been part of this project for a decade, who have been thinking about this content for a decade, reading deeply, thinking about these particular words over and over again, giving the, keeping the dialogue alive. So I bet Helen can talk more about that. But essentially, we're really trying to put out content that engages the general public and the people who want to find an on-ramp to this content if you've never read it before, and also the people who want to keep reading it, because I think this conversation shows just how deeply rewarding it can be to engage with something like the Iliad for a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades. You're really never done reading it and engaging with it. So, but Helen can talk more about, I think,
Yes.
the experience of and what's being offered through the Cosmos Society for everyone who is following along.
So Hélène, and just for the fun of it, I'll say it in French, I'll say it in English, and then I'll say it in modern Greek, and then I'll say it in ancient Greek. Hélène, Eleni, Helene. I've missed one of them. So Hélène is French. Helen is English. I guess I forgot the English. Eleni is modern Greek, and Helene is and Casey, you'll be amused. I told the general education heroes people that that we're going to pronounce ancient Greek not the way the rhapsode Ion would do it, because he would still say Philos, not Philos. So we're making a compromise. 4th century, because most English speakers couldn't make the distinction between Philos and pater, which doesn't have an H. How do you
Yeah,
like that? So we're 4th century creatures.
I do the same. I wouldn't be able to do the Pilos.
So dear Hélène, may I from now on just call you Eleni? I love the modern Greek version. So Eleni, can you tell us about Cosmos Society with a capital K? I'm not sure about that capital K, but you go.
Yeah, well, first I want to tell you that Denis Villeneuve, who made the 2017 new version of the Blade Runner who made the movie would certainly love to hear this conversation.
Yes.
Yes, I really think so. So anyway, to go back to Cosmos, yeah, with the help of dear Claudia, we started Cosmos indeed in 2014, and it has been growing and growing, and we try to help people who want to read all the ancient Greek literature text that we have. We have a big library for that, free online. And then we also realized that many people wanted to read in Greek and learn Greek, ancient Greek, and also tackle a little bit Latin, you know. So we opened some free online sessions to go through the ancient Greek text. And we also try to maintain the communication, conversation, and try to keep the logos going on. You know, conversation, talking, we have a forum where people can post things and develop their ideas. We have, you know, people can write articles and then we publish them. So we try to, you know, whatever they need, we try to offer them ways of deepening their knowledge about ancient Greek literature, about this important text that we have free online also. This is very important that everybody can come and, you know, participate at to the sessions free. And also we organize conversations with professors from different universities. And every month we try to organize an open house, like we did with you, Casey. You came several times to Cosmos. So really, that's all I can say right now about Cosmos. But it's a place where you can come and join if you want to look at some text, read in English, read in Greek, read in Latin, whatever you want to do. And we offer you the opportunity to develop your knowledge, to know more, to communicate with other people from all over the world. And voila.
That's so
Beautiful.
I just
wonderful.
want to say about the 27 Blade Runner 2049. You had mentioned that the filmmaker would have loved to hear this conversation. I wanted to recommend a that was published in Eidolon and is still available, even though Eidolon is not still publishing new things, by someone named C.W. Marshall, and it's called Do Androids Dream of Electric Greeks, which is, you know, playing on the title of the short story, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, that was the inspiration for the film, in, you know, the original film Blade Runner. And it's a great essay that kind of goes into the way that classical literature and mythology kind of infuse Blade Runner 2049 as well.
I love it.
So if people are
So
interested
cool.
in that too, they would enjoy that essay, Do Androids Dream of Electric Greeks.
Love it. And by the
So
way,
beautiful.
I very much admire what Denis Villeneuve tries to do, and I think that he's on record saying how much he admires the work of his predecessor, Ridley Scott,
Mhm.
and just all the effort that went into the first Blade Runner. So there's a continuity there too. But I would like for Claudia to give dear Casey some background about how we are, in order to promote continuity, trying to trying to stick with the traditions that first started at Harvard. And after all, Casey, you're a Harvard PhD, 2001.
One.
Um, it's a Harvard tradition, but because Harvard, for various reasons, is consistently under attack, Harvard has to protect itself in all sorts of ways so that the people who are enrolled in ancient Greek hero, which is now a general education course, it's no longer a core curriculum course. When you, Casey, and your dear colleague Mary and I were working together, um, that means that as far as what is available, for example, handouts, um, we have to have, may I put it this way, two tracks. There's the Harvard track for Harvard college students, but then there's the other track, which is what not only Hélène, but also Claudia represents, which is classical continuum, which is open to everybody out there, everybody, and
Right.
which is open access and which is free for everybody. So some inner city kid who's never heard of Achilles can can join us, just as privileged people can join us. Um, and and it's really international, or may I say global, but I didn't say it well. I would like for Claudia, who knows your legacy, dear Casey, to summarize, maybe very briefly, how classical continuum really does continue the tradition, both as a Harvard track. This year we have over 250 people enrolled. Not as big enrollments as we used to have, Casey, but in by today's standards, it's pretty good.
Yeah, not nothing.
Sure.
So Claudia, if you could take this up from where I left it, but I already want to tell you, dear Casey, my motive. What you said earlier about everything is just so precious and so ties in with what I was doing with Harvard College students for hour 0, hour 1, and hour 2. That's as far as we got so far. And what we're doing here for Cosmos Society, um, and and what we're doing here is available to all. But would you be willing, dear Casey, here's my subtext, to give your permission for Claudia and me to share the beautiful things you've already said, and I think we'll be saying if we still have time, with the Harvard College students, who I think will be
Absolutely. Of
inspired. Oh, good. So
course.
we have your permission. Perfect.
Yes.
So now that
Beautiful.
we have the hard part, and Casey made it easy, dear Claudia, could you take over and talk about our two-track system? And then I want to say something. You'll be very amused by this, Casey, but I'll save it till after Claudia is giving us the background. How I mentioned the word lament to the Harvard College students only yesterday for the first time. So
Okay.
yesterday and Wednesday, and I said, well, we're really going to get into it in hour 3 because that's the way it is in H24H. But I said, well, let's just do it this way. In lament, when you sing, you cry, and when you cry, you sing. And then I talked about Cleopatra in Iliad 9 as a lamenter, but only so far as how she is the number one person in Meleagros's ascending scale of affection, so they know about that. But
Okay.
but you gave the perfect introduction to lament, which is happening in hour 3.
Okay. I'll talk a little bit more about that, but let's let Claudia speak first.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, I'm super excited for that conversation. So I'll just keep it really brief, and I'll say that an important aspect of the Heroes Project in general is that it's touching on this idea that you were just talking about earlier, Greg, this intersection between teaching and research. And really the goal with what we're doing at Classical Continuum is not just to give access to really the foundation of the of the Heroes Project, which in every hour by hour post, if you go there, you'll see that there's going to be some featured vocabulary. We're going to have those focus passages featured. There'll be some multimedia content. It's really about making connections to the latest research and thinking about these texts. And so that's why it's so important that we're hosting you, Casey, because you're such a brilliant researcher and teacher, and you're bringing, although you've been part of the project for many years, your teaching and research is evolving all the time, and you're always learning new things. And we're always trying to bring the latest teaching and research and thinking and readings from the community, from former TFs, from Greg. And so that's what you'll see at Classical Continuum. So you'll see that Greg is weaving in sort of his latest thinking. He was just saying before about things he was learning about those beautiful 13 lines of poetry that Achilles performs about his anger. And so his thinking about that, his most recent writings, are really becoming part of the project too. And so it's all connected. And so there are ways to travel along the network of thought and learning for the Heroes Project that goes across those many, many years, because we are preserving all the content as we go. Every year where we're putting out new content for each hour. And so you can dip into hour 1 from 5 years ago, or you can dip into hour 1 from this year. And Hélène knows too that they're doing great work about putting out office hours at Cosmos from past editions of the Heroes Project. But I will be lamenting myself if we don't get more more conversation with you, Casey, about Lament, because you're so amazing.
Yeah.
And so we'd love for you to talk more about that.
Okay, if I'm going to give a little bit more background and then make sure I don't forget to talk about the word nostos and also
Yes.
ambush in connection with this.
Yes, yes.
So one thing I want to make sure everybody understands about lament and also epic poetry is you've probably already talked a bit about how the oral tradition of Homeric epic works and how it is a kind of song that was composed using a special diction of formulaic language where instead of individual words, you compose using formulaic units. And they so every song is a new composition, but it's made using very old, long-standing, many generations of use phrases that have been inherited over a long period of time. And and there's a ritual aspect to epic as well. But lament also is composed anew every time, right? It's not a memorized form of song. And yes, it expresses deep grief and crying, but it's also a song. So it draws on patterns and meters and formulaic language that has been handed down from generations of women. And so the thing is, anybody hearing the Iliad in a performance would have been present at many funerals over the course of their lives. And they would have heard their mothers lamenting. They would have heard their grandmothers lamenting. And so when this kind of diction, when this kind of grief-filled lament language makes it into the Iliad, which it frequently does, I mean, it has even been argued that it's the foundational level from which epic is created. But when they would have heard these elements, their emotions would have been triggered from just the not just the words, but also like the rhythms and the context. And so when you read a passage like, thus, Briseis spoke lamenting, and the women wailed back in response with Patroclus as their pretext, but each for their own cares. You can imagine an audience also being another level of grieving and emotional for their own cares as well as the content of the song. And I think that's just such a beautiful thing. And so when you hear lament, you might be thinking, when you hear that word, you might be thinking of the tears, you might be thinking of the emotion, but I want people to understand it as a form and also speech, because like I was saying earlier, women didn't typically have opportunities for commenting on their own lives, but through lament, they could say, these things happened to me. You know, my brothers were all killed. I was taken into captivity. You know, these kinds of things, and you know, traumatic events that they don't get to articulate in any other context. And so, you know, it's a really powerful form of song that's part of the Iliad, and that I think is a more important part of the Iliad than maybe a lot of people appreciate. So I wanted to say, inspired by Greg talking about a passage that he's reading in a new way, Achilles, you know, speaking about his own anger, I will say that a passage that I've returned to a lot in recent years is one where Achilles is talking about his own mother, Thetis, and how her grief is going to be so tremendous because, well, she's an immortal goddess, so she'll lament him for all time. You know, she'll never get to put away, but also um, he talks about how, you know, she sent her son out to battle, you know, and she'll never be able to welcome him back home. And so he basically says, you know, I'm never going to have a nostos, but there's also this idea of she's never going to have that completion of having sent her to battle and then getting him. And I've just noticed that pattern of going out and coming back is something that unites, which the word is nostos. You know, I'm never going to have homecoming. She's never going to her son back home. It's of course something you'll be exploring in this class in connection with the Odyssey and Odysseus, you know, having a nostos from the Trojan War, homecoming from the Trojan War, and reclaiming his own home and his marriage and his son, and his kingship. You know, one of my other areas of research has been on the theme of ambush.
Yes.
And you would not have thought that ambush, which is, you know, a form of warfare like special ops, if you think of like SEAL Team 6, you know, taking out Osama bin Laden, this is something that ambush is capable of doing when the face-to-face daytime battle strategies are not working. You have an alternative form of warfare. And we call it that, I think, in English, alternative warfare. Another yeah, special ops, I think, is also a great way to think about it. But that's a type of poetics that really infuses the Odyssey, but we do see it in the Iliad as well, in book 10 of the Iliad. And there's just a lot of wonderful connections that were made by just reading book 10 slowly. My friend Mary Abbott and I, she was also a head TF of Harvard Heroes, we wrote it together, but we were noticing connections between ambush and lament. And we were like, what is the connection there? But part of it is this idea of homecoming, because when people go off on an ambush, like it's in the dead of night, it's secret, you're wearing like camo and you know, things like that. If you go off on an ambush and then die out there, you know, die on the mission, you don't come home, and nobody knows what your story was. Nobody knows how you died, where you died. Did you die in a glorious way? Did you accomplish some amazing feat before you died? None of that is known. And so you don't have a nostos. And it's like a terrible thing, both for the people who were waiting for the people to come home, and also for the person who died, of course, because they don't get their story. Their story can't be told properly, right? And so this idea of going out on an ambush, but if you don't come back, it is such a terrible thing. And so the same language is used about going out and coming home. And if you read that book, which a lot of people don't, for various reasons, so you'll just have to read Mary's and my book. It's called Iliad 10 and the Poetics of Ambush. But if that book, you'll notice that at the end, everybody's like anxiously waiting for the ambushers to come home. And when they do, it's such a celebration. Um, so it's just one of those funny things that I didn't expect, that what I thought were two very different areas of research, lament and ambush, and this traditional form of poetry like really came together. And it's all around that idea of getting back, of coming home, of making it back home. And actually, Odysseus is one of the ambushers, of course, in Iliad 10. And when the other hero, Diomedes, has to pick an ambush partner, how could he not pick Odysseus? Because Odysseus really knows how to get home. He says it really knows how to make it home. So it's like it's wonderful, because it's like in the Iliad, it's already saying Odysseus already he's the master of nostos, and so the passage in Iliad 10 is making that connection too between different kinds of traditions and different kinds of poetics. So I love it.
Love it. I love it.
Well, I mean, that is just such a beautiful, beautiful connection that you've pointed out for us. I just want to be mindful of our time. It is 11 o'clock. So, I mean, are there any last words that we want to share for our community as we think about this? And I just want to say first, Casey, like I hope you'll be joining us again. This was such a beautiful and fruitful conversation.
Happy to.
I think that was going to be my only word to add, which is let's do this again and soon.
Yes. And thanks for everyone who's watching this. We're going to put links for everything we mentioned in the description of the video, including Casey's beautiful books, which are available for free via the Center for Hellenic Studies. So when we say, hey, you should read this book, just know these are all open access, and Casey's amazing that she's sharing her scholarship in that way, as does Greg. Everything at the Cosmos Society, also free. So thank you for joining us, everyone. This was a great conversation. I look forward to our next one.
Till the next time.